are too many candidates will confuse the voters, as you talked about. I love that.
What they're saying, folks, is you're dumb. That's it. They just think you're stupid.
And, Jared, back to your question, some states actually have encoded as a criteria on whether you are important enough to be on the ballot as, quote, refers to candidates recognized in the news media and other candidates.
That doesn't sound very democratic to me.
No, it certainly doesn't.
Sounds elitist, like the news people want to rule today.
Right.
So they're already telling us who we can vote for.
Who your choices
That's
are before
it.
you can
You're
even
limiting
find
these
out
people because we choose these people.
That's right. If you control
Not because
the
they're the best person, because we choose.
They've been anointed by the media.
If you control the ballot, you control who people have a right to vote for to put in office. That is not a free and open election.
No, and the fact is, if you're not on the ballot, the media almost certainly is not going to talk about you.
Okay, let's get down to the real nitty-gritty here. The key question, Clell, I have for you to ask you is explain how this political two-party monopoly affects our country and all the citizens in it. Take your time. Let's go through this because this is the key. This is why this show is being done right now.
There's so many facets to this, but I'll try to.
Well, let's start with the Constitution.
Well, the Constitution, number one, never promotes a quote-unquote two-party system. That's often sounded forth by people who stand themselves to be self-serving and gain from it. The ones who are always talking about it are either Democrats or Republicans, nobody else. And when that is the understanding, you keep broadcasting and sending this out over the airwaves and personally, and in person, however you may do it, to young, old, and in between. It's a well-known fact that's thought formation. It's essentially a slow-motion form of mind control. People think that really is true, and it's not. Constitutionally, there's no foundation for it, and the founders, like John Adams, even spoke of his fear of such a thing.
Well, let's talk about the First Amendment.
First Amendment, that is an interesting and often trampled on amendment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, assembly, redress of grievances.
What I key on is the right to petition the government for a redress of grievance.
Yes, and this is
how do we petition the government?
Because if it's a partisan, even if you want to say bipartisan, kind of conglomerate, if that's what the government has become, and it is in their own self-interests to keep out the competition, and it is, just in a very selfish sense, it is in their self-interest to keep out competition. Competition has traditionally brought in new ideas that they didn't necessarily like. They had to water them down and pick them up and play like they were playing the game, but recall, referendum, initiative, deficit, cutting the deficit, that was something the Reform Party came in. The Republicans and the Democrats, for example, speaking of that, they couldn't cut that down, so they started picking up the rhetoric, stole it right out of from the Reform Party at that time, used it as their own, although they watered it down so much, and this is obviously was their intent, because that's less than 20 years ago that all took place. Where is talk about cutting deficits now?
Oh, well, that doesn't exist.
Well,
let's get back.
I'm saying that all of the good ideas and the ideas of returning to constitutionality, which would remedy many of our problems right now, such as bailouts and all these other things.
Right.
If we just obeyed the rules, many of our problems would be ended quickly, and many of our freedoms would be returned, because the government, as it gets away from, as in this way, a big way, away from the U.S. Constitution, it cannot give new rights. That's foolishness to believe. And to the extent that they claim they do, and we go along with it, government gets bigger, and necessarily as government gets bigger, individual liberty gets smaller.
All right, Clell, let's talk about the 14th Amendment, because this is where I see the red alert.
Okay.
And I'm particularly talking about equal protection of the laws. We are guaranteed equal protection under the law.
Mm-hmm.
I am not equally protected if the gentleman or lady I want to vote for is not allowed on the ballot because the two major parties don't want competition.
That's the brass tacks of it.
That
because you were
violates my equal protection under the law.
And so that it makes a mockery of the 14th Amendment.
My vote is not protected.
Yes, because it might as well not even exist.
Right.
And it's gotten so bad, like in Texas here, we know that the two big parties even get to violate the laws that they themselves passed on it. They did it last year. Remember in August...
They did it last year? I'm listening.
Remember when Obama and McCain finally were offered up to the state of Texas as the candidates for the respective party for the presidency?
Yes.
They didn't make the deadline. That's state law. They don't make the deadline. They're not supposed to be allowed to be on the Texas state ballot.
Bob Dole didn't make the deadline in '88 either, but the Texas Attorney General at the time just waived it.
Which a similar thing happened this time when Bob Barr and the Libertarian Party brought that lawsuit based on the Texas law passed by Republicans and Democrats in the state, in our legislature and governor's mansion. He brought that up, and it just so happened that the overwhelmingly Republican-controlled Supreme Court, without comment, just set it aside.
So where's equal protection under the law?
It doesn't exist. Not in this. And if it doesn't exist in this area, folks, it doesn't exist, and you will see it becoming less and less even pretended about as time goes on.
And let's face it, these ballot laws protect incumbents and, more importantly, the people that put the incumbents into office.
Yes, exactly.
So there is no motivation with the establishment to give us free access. I mean, there's, and so let's talk about the results. What do we have in this country as a result of these crooked, rigged ballot access laws?
Well, number one, we have slews of elections that nobody even bothers to run against incumbents.
Right. 50% of the U.S. congressmen run unopposed.
Yes. And it doesn't matter how much people jabber about throwing the bums out, no matter how badly they've done, 97, 98% of the incumbents, even in the worst of their times, the worst behavior, get reelected.
And 1/3 of all those running in the state houses are unopposed. And in Texas, Massachusetts, and Florida, 1/2 of the people running in the state house are unopposed. That's obscene.
And by the way, they've got another little trick in 46 states. Remember back in 2006, Joseph Lieberman was defeated in the Democrat primary in Massachusetts. Well, Massachusetts, fortunately for them, is one of only 4 states. The other 46 have what are called sore loser laws. But in Massachusetts, the reason Lieberman was able to run then as an independent is because there's no sore loser law, which we have in most states. And what that basically says, if you lose in a primary in one of the two big parties, you can't run as an independent. You can't run on another party ticket. It's over.
That's got to be unconstitutional. That's got to be unconstitutional.
Of course it's unconstitutional. It doesn't matter, apparently, to the two bigs. And here's a guy who had been a long-time incumbent senator, runs into some trouble. But if they had a sore loser law, there would be no, in Massachusetts, there would be no Senator Joseph Lieberman right now.
Bottom line on all this is the Republicans and the Democrats don't want to have history repeat itself like it did back when a minority party put Abe Lincoln in the White House and killed off a majority party called the Whigs. The Republicans replaced the Whigs.
And the Republicans were the 4th largest party when they started, after the Free Soil Party.
Right. So they're a very minor party, but Abraham Lincoln, who was a political genius, managed to get himself elected, and that was it for them. And they don't want that to happen again.
They wanted to close the door after they got in. And at the time he won that election, his name didn't even appear on 9 states because it was so ripped up and everything. But once they did get in, you can bet your bottom dollar they didn't have any trouble staying in for a long time.
Oh, really? With their ballot incumbent plan. Well, now let's switch this a little bit. Jared, I think you wanted to ask something about the Texas state legislature. Why don't you go ahead and ask that question?